Today we're ripping the curtain off the hardest-hitting, most surprising shotguns that ever saw the American frontier. And no, this isn't the same old coach gun parade you've seen 100 times. We're digging up shotguns so unusual, so brutal in close quarters, they rewrote the rules of self-defense and survival on the trail and in the saloon. Get ready, because some of these shotguns will blow apart everything you thought you knew about frontier firepower. And if rare Wild West weapons are your thing, you'll want to stick around. Hit subscribe now so you don't miss what's coming. Number 15. Stevens Tip-Up. Single shot. The simple shot that kept a man alive. Not everything that won a fight had to roar 3 times. Sometimes the weapon that mattered was the one you could clean with a stick and fire again. A single-shot break action from Stevens that sat in many hunters' packs and on ranch porches across the frontier. Stevens' single-shot break actions were the dirt-simple, no-frills solution. Cheap to buy, easy to fix, and brutally dependable when all you needed was one clean blast to turn a hunt into dinner or a desperate stand into a chance to run. In plain figures, a typical Stevens tip-up sporting model of the late 19th century was commonly built in 12 or 16 gauge, weighed roughly 5 to 6 pounds, and had barrel lengths around 26 to 30 inches. Small, light, and pointable. Loaded with a 1-ounce shot charge, approximately 350 lead pellets for a 12 gauge. A single heavy blast from one of these guns could clear a doorway, drop a game bird, or stop a man wide enough for a fleeing hand to find cover. That one perfect shot profile is why men kept them close. You didn't rely on volume, you relied on placement. But that simplicity cut both ways. A single shot gives you only one chance between reloads, and reloading a muzzle or a tip-up in the chaos of a saloon brawl, or while horse's bolt is slow and clumsy compared to a repeating shotgun or a short coach gun. Ammunition was cheap, yes, but when the fight didn't stop after one blast, you suddenly owed yourself another plan. Run, drop, or reach for a knife. Furthermore, the light frames and simple locks tolerated rough use but weren't built for endless high-stress firing. Springs loosened, hinge pins wore, and a bent breech face could mean the difference between a saved life and a wasted pull. So, Stevens' single shots earned a hard reputation. Reliable, extremely common in imagery and surviving examples, and the kind of gun a working man could maintain himself, but ultimately limited by the single-shot constraint. That made them great for hunting and last-ditch defense. But as cartridge technology and repeaters arrived, Americans rapidly shifted toward guns that gave you more than one chance. Up next, a shotgun you'd spot on a coach before you'd spot a Stevens. The factory-ordered short side-by-side built to be carried, fired, and reloaded fast. Number 14. Custom short coach side-by-side. The shotgun built for wagons and close calls. Not every scattergun was meant for the hunt. Some were cut short, ordered factory short, or trimmed down by a gunsmith so they could swing fast inside a coach or clear leather before a robber could blink. These short side-by-sides were the working man's shield on rattling stage routes and lonely trails. Simple, brutal, and made to speak quickly in cramped quarters. Unlike the ornate imports, a coach double wasn't about finesse. It was about reach for the holsters, a snap of the barrels, and a thunderclap at point-blank range. The specs tell the story. Many of these coach-length doubles were 12 gauge, cut to 18 to 20-inch barrels with overall lengths of only 35 to 37 inches, nearly a foot shorter than a hunting double. That size let a guard tuck one beside his seat, or a ranch hand hide one under a blanket, ready for the moment when trouble came riding. Each barrel could launch a 1 1/8 ounce load, roughly 400 to 500 pellets, and with 2 barrels side by side, a defender could empty nearly 1,000 pellets into the air before a bandit's second shout. At the 10-yard ranges where ambushes were sprung, that was as close to a guaranteed hit as the frontier offered. But shortening barrels carried drawbacks. The violent blast kicked harder into the shoulder, the muzzle flash was blinding at night, and patterns spread wide enough that beyond 30 yards the pellets lost discipline and power. A man carrying a coach double could end a fight in a doorway. But at longer ranges he was outclassed by a full-length sporting gun or repeating rifle. Still, these factory short and cut-down doubles became symbols of the frontier stage line. The gun a guard could hide, draw, and fire in a single desperate movement. They proved that sometimes less barrel meant more survival. And while these stubby cannons owned the close fight, across the ocean a different kind of double, elegant, overbuilt, and impossibly complex, was making waves among the gentry. Number 13. Boss & Company. Triple barrel SXSXS. The aristocrat's oddity with one barrel too many. In a world where 2 barrels were already considered plenty, Boss and Company decided to raise eyebrows by building a handful of triple barrel side-by-sides, 3 full shotgun tubes aligned across the breech. For London's elite, this wasn't a frontier necessity, but a statement piece. The gun equivalent of arriving in a gold-trimmed carriage. A few of these extravagant triples crossed the Atlantic, tucked into the luggage of officers, hunters, or wealthy travelers who wanted to carry something no cowboy had ever seen. The numbers were as excessive as the design. Surviving Boss triples were built in 12-gauge, weighing close to 9 pounds and stretching nearly 48 inches overall. Each barrel could fire a 1-ounce load, approximately 350 to 400 pellets, meaning one gun carried 3 full shotgun blasts before reloading. Over 1,000 lead pellets ready to be unleashed in quick succession. In a cramped saloon or at ambush range, that sort of firepower could clear the air faster than any revolver. But 3 barrels came with problems. The gun was heavy, awkward to balance, and expensive to regulate, so each barrel patterned true. Firing 3 loads in rapid order heated the barrels fast, and repairing a complex London triple in a dusty frontier town was next to impossible. For most men, it was overkill in every sense of the word. Still, the Boss triple barrel remains one of the strangest and most striking shotguns ever to appear in the West. Proof that wealth and curiosity sometimes carried as much weight as practicality. And while a 3-shot double dazzled the eyes, another British maker was quietly experimenting with triple barrels of their own. Commissions that leaned less on spectacle and more on raw performance. Number 12. Westley Richards 3-barrel special. The commissioned thunderstick that mixed elegance with raw stopping power. Not a factory fad, but a deliberate commission. A Westley Richards 3-barrel was the kind of gun an English gentleman ordered when 2 shots simply didn't feel like enough. Hand-filed in Birmingham and London workshops, these specials carried the hallmarks of the house. Careful engraving, perfect wood-to-metal fit, and the sort of finish that belonged in a gamekeeper's lodge rather than a chuck wagon. A rare example or two found its way west with officers, sportsmen, or collectors who wanted sport gun performance and a little theatrical excess packed into a single stock. In hard numbers, a Westley 3-barrel of the era was commonly chambered in the 12-gauge, pushed the scales to about 8 to 9 pounds, and measured roughly 48 inches overall, with barrels around 28 to 30 inches. Each tube could be loaded with a 1¼ ounce shot charge, over 500 lead pellets per barrel. So a man with 3 matched barrels could, in theory, unleash more than 1,500 pellets in rapid succession before a reload. That translated to devastating close-range stopping power. 3 matched pointable blasts could end a room fight or scatter an ambush faster than any single shotgun. But the beauty of a Westley special carried practical costs. Regulating 3 barrels so they hit the same point at useful range required factory skill. Timing and lockup had to be precise, and those tolerances were easily fouled by grit and black powder. The weight and balance made it awkward on horseback, and the expense of feeding 3 high-quality 1¼ ounce shells everywhere you rode put the design out of reach for most working men. In short, it was lethal on paper and spectacular in a lodge, less so on the dusty trail. So the Westley Richards 3-barrel sits here as a showpiece that could dominate at close range, but demand a workshop to keep it that way. It's a reminder that the frontier saw both pragmatic tools and splendid luxuries, and that sometimes the most impressive guns were simply too delicate for daily survival. Number 11. Hollenbeck Drilling. America's ambitious jack-of-all-trades shotgun. You'd call it audacious. 2 shotgun tubes paired with a rifle barrel and 1 break-open frame. A loud promise that you could take birds, deer, or trouble with the same shoulder mount. Frank Hollenbeck and the small 3-barrel gun company pushed this American take on the drilling idea in the late 19th century, building compact, heavy-framed guns meant to solve a simple frontier problem. Carry 1 firearm that could do everything. A few of these made it into the hands of riverboat guards, pack hunters, and officers pushing into unsettled country. Not common, but memorable when they appeared. In hard numbers, the typical Hollenbeck drilling you'll see in catalogs is built around 2 12-gauge shotgun tubes over a center rifle barrel, often .32 to .44 caliber, with overall weights commonly around 9 pounds and overall lengths near 46 to 48 inches. Each shotgun tube would take a 1 to 1¼ ounce charge, approximately 350 to 500 pellets, while the rifle tube offered a single solid projectile for longer shots, meaning one weapon could deliver buckshot at close range or a rifle slug for a distant animal. On paper, that versatility was the dream. 1 mount, 3 outcomes. In real use, the drilling's power was situational and raw. A man facing close attackers could drop 2 shotgun blasts and switch to the rifle tube to finish a fleeing target. A combination that terrified anyone who hadn't trained for it. For hunters traveling light across mixed terrain, the drilling replaced a rack of guns and let a single shooter answer a dozen problems in one sling. But the machine of convenience had glaring flaws. Barrel regulation was almost impossibly difficult. Getting all 3 barrels to strike the same point of aim at useful ranges demanded factory precision and repeated adjustment. The action was heavy and awkward. Repair parts were rare outside big cities, and the complicated lockwork fouled or mistimed under heavy black powder use. Ammunition logistics, carrying both shotgun shells and rifle cartridges in the right mix, added another layer of complication few frontier users wanted to manage. So the Hollenbeck Drilling stands as a bold American experiment. Enormously useful where well set up, but fragile, heavy, and high maintenance where most frontier life demanded simplicity. Up next, an honest American hammer double that traded elegance for near indestructible service. Number 10, L.C. Smith Hammer Double, the American workhorse that wouldn't quit. Nothing pretty about it, just a stout, honest gun built to be used and abused until it gave up. L.C. Smiths grew out of the Baker tradition and became synonymous with American hammer doubles that balanced decent fit with field-tough reliability. Ranch hands, game wardens, and private guards picked these up because they wanted a gun that fired when called, not one that needed a corner gunsmith and a sunny bench to behave. You'd see them in saddles, coach seats, and guard posts from New Mexico to Montana. In cold numbers, a typical late 19th century L.C. Smith Hammer Double was most often chambered in 12 gauge, weighed about 7 to 7.5 pounds, and ran 28 to 30-inch barrels. Geometry built for a solid swing and dependable patterning. Loaded with 1 to 1.25 ounce charges, approximately 350 to 500 pellets depending on shot size, these doubles produced consistent, hard-hitting patterns at close to mid-ranges, reliable knockdown power without the finicky regulation of best-grade sidelocks. That predictability is why so many working men trusted one to settle a charge or bring home meat after a long day. The real advantage was maintenance. Simpler internals, fewer delicate parts, and a rugged action that a competent frontier gunsmith could service with basic tools. Springs and screws were serviceable. Timing could be reset in a rough shop, and the whole gun tolerated grit and crude handling far better than a high-grade English sidelock. For everyday survival and heavy use, L.C. Smiths were about the best compromise between performance and durability available at the time. Still, they weren't without faults. The exposed hammers and heavier lockwork meant slower follow-up compared with emerging hammerless designs and repeaters, and the gun's weight could be a burden after a long ride. They also lacked the surgical trigger brakes and ultra-tight regulation of Purdy or Rigby-grade doubles, trade-offs that mattered to sportsmen and officers, but less so to working hands. Solid, dependable, and built for life in the dirt. That's the L.C. Smith. Next up, the short, brutal coach gun you'd expect to see across the backboard of any stagecoach. Compact, deadly, and designed to be brought to bear in a heartbeat. Number 9, Harrington and Richardson coach gun, the short thunder that guarded the stage. When a guard swung open a coach door, he needed one thing above all: instant, brutal stopping power in half a second. The Harrington and Richardson coach gun, a stout, short-barrel side-by-side made by an American firm known for rugged, affordable arms, was the kind of tool that answered that call. Built for marshals, stage guards, and private escorts, these coach guns were optimized for the brutal geometry of a doorway. Short, fast to point, and merciless at close range. Put in numbers, the typical H&R coach gun was chambered in 12 gauge, cut to 18 to 20-inch barrels, and weighed roughly 6 to 7 pounds, light enough to be swung from the hip, but heavy enough to soak up recoil. Loaded with a 1 to 1.25 ounce buck or shot charge, approximately 350 to 500 pellets per shot, a coach gun could saturate a 10 to 20 yard approach with lethal density. At those distances, a single barrel was often all you needed to stop a hold-up cold. That brutal immediacy made the coach gun the frontline deterrent on dangerous routes and in rough-town sheriff's offices. But the design traded range and finesse for point-blank authority. Short barrels spread patterns wide past 30 yards, the recoil bit hard into an often unprotected shoulder, and firing in low light could bring blinding muzzle flash and singed eyebrows to whoever stood too close. The abbreviated sight radius made precision impossible, and in a prolonged gunfight, the coach gun's single or double shot limitation left the user vulnerable once the barrels were empty. Still, when the danger closed to bare inches, nothing on a stage did the job faster. The H&R coach gun is the image everyone pictures when they think stage guard shotgun. Raw, loud, and immediate. And while it owned the doorway, richer men and gamekeepers further up the social ladder carried regulated sidelocks and long doubles that could place a pattern at 30 yards. Next up on our list is one of those. The John Rigby and Company sidelock double, a heavier, more precise option for men who wanted both stopping power and accuracy. Number 8. Marlin Slide Repeater. The Frontier's first taste of more shots right now. Not a fancy best gun, but a practical game changer. Marlin's early slide action shotguns gave a man multiple rounds at the ready without wrestling a lever or reloading one shell at a time. These repeaters arrived as the Frontier transitioned into the age of repeat fire, perfect for wagon guards, ranch hands, and anyone who preferred wrestling an active threat with a tube full of shots, rather than hoping one perfect blast would do the job. They weren't ubiquitous at first, but where they appeared, they changed how close fights played out. In hard terms, a late 19th century Marlin slide repeater you'll see in period photos was typically chambered in 12 gauge, weighed around 7 to 8 pounds, and ran 26 to 30-inch barrels with a tubular magazine holding about 3 to 5 rounds depending on the model. Loaded with a 1-to-1 and a quarter-ounce shot charge, approximately 350 to 500 pellets per shell, that magazine could give a man several instant follow-up shots without breaking his stance. A decisive advantage when a second or third blast was the difference between getting cut down and getting away. On the trail, that meant you could suppress an attack, ride through a scattering, or lay down repeated fire while swapping targets. Tactics that single shots and simple doubles simply couldn't match. A Marlin in the hands of someone who knew its balance and reload rhythm was terrifying. It turned close, chaotic fights into manageable bursts of controlled volume. But early slide repeaters weren't flawless. Tube magazines took longer to reload than modern box systems, and added weight forward of the action, which altered swing and balance. The action and magazine springs were more maintenance sensitive than simple hammer doubles, and early designs could jam if dirt or grit found its way into the tube. Ammunition supply was another practical limit. Carrying multiple loaded shells meant more weight and more lead to keep dry. Still, the Marlin slide repeater marked a pivotal shift. When repeaters showed up on a ranch or coach, a quarrel that used to end in a single desperate blast could now be met with immediate follow-ups. Up next, a maker that married precision and prestige. A sidelock double built to be seen and to perform. Repeaters like this changed the game. More shots, faster follow-ups, and a whole new way to fight. But here's my question. Which shotgun so far would you trust your life with on the Frontier? Drop the number in the comments. I'll pin the best answers. Number 7. Anson and Deeley Boxlock Double. The reliable, hammerless workhorse that changed how men shot. You'd notice it by the clean, squat action and the lack of exposed hammers. A Boxlock double was the practical revolution hidden in plain sight. Patented by Anson and Deeley in 1875, the Boxlock put the lockwork inside the frame where it stayed cleaner, simpler, and easier to produce. That made hammerless doubles cheaper to buy, faster to operate, and less fussy in the field. Ideal for a ranch hand who wanted an honest gun that fired when it needed to, not a fussy best gun that required a bench. In hard figures, a typical late 19th century Anson and Deeley style Boxlock shotgun was most often chambered in 12 gauge, weighed about 6 to 7 pounds, and ran 28 to 30-inch barrels. Loaded with a 1-to-1 and a quarter-ounce shot charge, approximately 350 to 500 pellets per barrel, a Boxlock delivered the same blunt stopping power as pricier sidelocks, but with far fewer delicate parts to worry about. The hammerless action also sped follow-up shots. No cocking of exposed hammers, just a quick break, load, and point. Faster under stress and less likely to snag when you drew from a scabbard or the saddle. That simplicity was its real strength on the Frontier. Boxlocks tolerated dirt and rough handling better than many fancy sidelocks. Their enclosed internals were less exposed to grit. Timing was easier to reset in a basic shop, and replacement parts were more standardized. For towns, stage guards, and working hunters who needed a dependable gun, the Boxlock was the smart choice, the kind of shotgun you could pass to a recruit and trust them to bring it back intact. Still, cheaper doesn't mean indestructible. Lower-grade Boxlocks could have weaker springs and softer turning pins than high-grade sidelocks, and the economy of production sometimes meant looser fitment that wore faster under heavy use. Very rough handling could cause timing issues or loosen screws, and the entry-level examples lacked the regulation precision a Rigby or Purdy could offer at 20 to 30 yards. But for sheer serviceability, fast to operate, easier to maintain, and plentiful in surviving photographs, the Anson and Deeley Boxlock is a Frontier favorite. Up next, repeaters that changed the calculus of close combat. Early Stevens and Savage slide hog lever repeaters that put more instant lead on target. Number 6. Stevens, Savage. Early slide and lever repeaters. The fast follow-up shot that rewrote close fights. Not a single masterpiece, but a family of practical repeaters. These Stevens and Savage early slide lever shotguns put more immediate lead on target than any single shot or break action could. And they arrived just when frontier fights started to demand follow-ups instead of lone miracles. Hunters, ranch hands, and guardmen loved them because they blended reasonable reliability with quick follow-up fire. Rack the slide or work the lever, and you had another shell in the chamber without a panicked reload. Where they appeared, they changed tactics, from make the one shot count to make the first 3 shots count. In hard numbers, a common late 19th century Stevens or Savage repeater you'll see in period photos was usually chambered in 12 gauge, weighed about 7 to 8 pounds, and ran 26 to 30-inch barrels. Tube or tubular magazines held 3 to 6 rounds depending on model and barrel length, and each shell typically carried a 1 to 1.25 ounce shot load, approximately 350 to 500 pellets, meaning a shooter could send up to half a dozen instant blasts downrange before needing to reload from a pouch. That immediate volume was lethal at coach range and turned ambushes into suppressive engagements, letting one man keep an opponent pinned while he moved or retreated. Practical as they were, early repeaters had limits. Tubular magazines added forward weight that changed swing and made fast mounting trickier. Magazine springs and feeding lips were sensitive to grit, and badly maintained guns could jam at the worst moment. Early metallurgy and finishes also meant these actions needed regular attention. A wet river crossing or a face full of dust could produce a stoppage that a simple hammer double would shrug off. Ammunition logistics again mattered. Carrying half a dozen shells was heavier and bulkier than a single spare, and magazines took longer to top up in the field. Still, these repeaters were a clear evolution. More shots, faster follow-ups, and a tactical shift every bit as important to frontier firefights as the arrival of repeating rifles. Up next, a gun built to be short, brutal, and obvious. The Harrington and Richardson coach gun that guards trusted in doorways and on stage routes. Number 5, Harrington and Richardson coach gun. The short thunder that guarded the stage. When a guard swung open a coach door, he needed one thing above all: instant, brutal stopping power in the blink of an eye. The Harrington and Richardson coach gun, a stout, short barrel side-by-side from an American firm known for rugged, affordable arms, answered that call. Built for marshals, stage guards, and private escorts, these coach guns were optimized for the brutal geometry of a doorway. Short, fast to point, and merciless at close range. In hard numbers, a typical H&R coach gun of the late 19th century was chambered in 12 gauge, cut to 18 to 20-inch barrels, and weighed roughly 6 to 7 pounds. Compact enough to be swung from the hip and quick enough to bring to bear from a coach window. Loaded with 1 to 1.25 ounce shot loads, approximately 350 to 500 pellets per barrel. A double blast at 10 to 15 yards could saturate a choke point completely. 2 barrels meant nearly 1,000 lethal pellets could be airborne before an attacker even knew what hit him. That immediate raw density of lead made the coach gun the go-to deterrent for stage routes and frontier patrols. But the advantages came at a cost. Short barrels spat wide patterns past 30 yards, and the blowback to the shoulder was brutal. Firing indoors could momentarily blind the shooter with muzzle flash and leave him bruised. Limited capacity, 2 shots, left little margin for error once the barrels were empty, and the lack of a longer sight radius made accurate aimed shots impossible. Still, when the threat lived within 30 feet, none of those drawbacks mattered. Authority and instant incapacitation did. So the Harrington and Richardson coach gun earned its place as the classic close-quarters tool. Simple, tough, and terrifying up close. It's a design that looks right in any Old West image, which is why you see it so often in period photographs and auctions. Next up, a true American hammer double, the L.C. Smith, a gun that traded glamour for reliability and became a workhorse across the frontier. Number 4, L.C. Smith Hammer Double, the American hammer gun that earned its keep on every ranch and range. You'd spot it by the workmanlike silhouette, heavy barrels, exposed hammers, and wood scarred by honest use rather than carved for display. L.C. Smith evolved from Baker roots into a shotgun built for men who needed something that would fire after a week in a rain-drenched saddlebag. These hammer doubles weren't about prestige. They were about reliability, repairability, and a pattern you could count on when a raiding dog or a desperate bandit slid into range. Put into hard figures, a typical late 19th century L.C. Smith hammer. Double was most commonly chambered in 12 gauge, weighed about 7 to 7.5 pounds, and ran 28 to 30-inch barrels. dimensions that gave a solid swing and stable point of impact. Loaded with 1 to 1 and a quarter-ounce shot charges, approximately 350 to 500 pellets per shell, an L.C. Smith sent consistent, brutally effective patterns inside 30 yards, the exact envelope where most frontier fights and predator encounters ended. That dependability is why ranch hands, stage guards, and small-town marshals trusted them. They delivered predictable stopping power without needing a specialist's care. The real advantage was in the internals. Simple, robust lockwork that a competent frontier gunsmith could strip, clean, and retime by the light of a lantern. Springs were replaceable, timing could be reset with basic tools, and the exposed hammer meant fewer mechanical surprises in the heat of action. For daily use, that resilience beat a fragile, best-grade sidelock every time. Still, the hammer double had trade-offs. Exposed hammers slowed rapid follow-ups compared with hammerless box locks or repeaters, and the heavier action could be tiring after a long ride. They also lacked the razor triggers and ultra-tight regulation of an English best gun. Sacrifices L.C. Smith owners accepted in return for a gun that survived mud, sweat, and hard miles. So the L.C. Smith sits near the top of practical frontier firearms. Not the prettiest, but one of the most dependable tools a man could carry. Next up, the Winchester Model 1893. An early slide pump design that began to change how men thought about immediate follow-up fire. Number 3. Winchester Model 1893. The experimental pump that paved the way for legends. Before the Model 1897 became an icon, there was the Winchester 1893, John Browning's first foray into a repeating shotgun built on a sliding pump action. Introduced in the early 1890s, it was designed to feed from a tubular magazine and cycle shells with a quick rack of the forearm. For a frontier suddenly shifting toward repeat fire, the 1893 looked futuristic. No exposed hammers, no fiddling with barrels, just pump and shoot. A handful of lawmen, guards, and settlers picked them up, eager to test a shotgun that promised more shots than any double. The specs tell the story. The 1893 was chambered in 12 gauge, had a 5-round tubular magazine plus 1 in the chamber, and weighed roughly 7.5 pounds with 30-inch barrels in its sporting configuration. Each shell carried 1 to 1 and a quarter ounces of lead shot, approximately 350 to 500 pellets, and with half a dozen shells on tap, a shooter could unleash more than 2,000 pellets in rapid succession. A staggering leap from the 2 blasts of a traditional double. For stage guards or marshals staring down multiple attackers, that kind of firepower changed the odds. But the 1893 had problems. Designed for black powder shells, its action wasn't strong enough to handle the higher pressures of new smokeless powder loads. Under stress, the receiver could stretch or crack, and Winchester quickly realized the model needed a redesign. Owners loved the concept but cursed the durability issues, and many 1893s were recalled and destroyed once the improved 1897s hit the market. Still, the 1893 deserves its place. The first American pump shotgun that proved the repeating concept worked. It was the bridge between old-world doubles and the trench guns that followed. And when Winchester corrected its flaws, the result would become the single most famous repeating shotgun of the frontier and beyond. The Model 1897. Number 2. Winchester Model 1897. The pump gun that redefined the battlefield and the frontier. When John Browning fixed the flaws of the 1893, he gave the world the Winchester 1897, the first truly rugged smokeless powder pump-action shotgun. Introduced in 1897, it came in Riot, trench, and sporting configurations, and quickly earned a reputation as the most versatile scattergun of its era. From saloon keepers to railroad guards, the 97 delivered something no double or single shot could. Reliable, rapid repeat fire with the muscle to handle modern shells. In hard terms, the Winchester 1897 was chambered in 12 and 16 gauge, offered barrel lengths from 20 to 32 inches, and weighed about 7.5 to 8 pounds depending on configuration. Its tubular magazine carried 5 rounds plus 1 in the chamber for 6 shots total, each loaded with 1 to 1 and a quarter ounces of lead, approximately 350 to 500 pellets. In a close-range fight, that meant more than 3,000 pellets could be unleashed in seconds without breaking stance. The exposed hammer made the action easy to understand, while its strong receiver was proofed for smokeless loads that earlier pumps couldn't handle. The 97's psychological effect was as real as its stopping power. A guard could cycle the slide and send the unmistakable metallic clack-clack echoing through a rail car, and everyone in earshot knew what came next. That sound became as intimidating as the blast itself. But the gun wasn't flawless. Its open-topped action invited grit and dirt, requiring more cleaning than enclosed designs, and the exposed hammer could snag or slow a careless draw. Despite those quirks, it became the standard by which repeating shotguns were measured for decades. So effective that the military carried it into the trenches of World War I, earning it the infamous title of the trench broom. For the frontier, the Winchester 1897 was the exclamation point. Rugged, reliable, and devastating. But it also set the stage for our final entry, the shotgun that, in both image and influence, became the most iconic scattergun of the Old West era. Number 1, Winchester Model 1897, Trench and Riot Variants, the most iconic scattergun of the frontier's twilight. At the very top of the list sits the Winchester Model 1897 in its short-barreled Riot and Trench configurations, the versions that cemented the gun's reputation as the deadliest repeating shotgun of its time. While the full-length sporting 97 was already popular, the 20-inch Riot and bayonet-fitted trench models became legends. Compact, fast handling, and devastating at close range, these variants offered everything a lawman, guard, or soldier needed when the fight closed to bare yards. The hard stats make their dominance clear. Chambered in 12-gauge, these Riot and Trench versions carried a 5-round tubular magazine, plus 1 in the chamber, giving 6 shots on tap. Each 12-gauge shell delivered about 1¼ ounces of shot, approximately 500 pellets, meaning a shooter could unleash 3,000 pellets in less than 10 seconds without reloading. At close quarters, nothing else on the frontier could match that rate of fire or saturation. Their battlefield records sealed the legend. In the Spanish-American War on the US-Mexico border, and later in the trenches of World War I, the short 97 proved itself as both a guard's tool and a soldier's nightmare weapon. The sound of the pump cycling as that sharp metallic clack was enough to rattle nerves before a shot was even fired. But even this Titan had limitations. The exposed hammer and open-top receiver demanded cleaning and attention, especially in mud or dust. Recoil from the short-barreled variants was punishing, and reloading the tubular magazine under fire was slower than the gun's blistering rate of fire suggested. Still, those drawbacks did little to tarnish its reputation, so the Winchester 1897 Riot and Trench guns stand at number 1, the ultimate scatterguns of the Wild West's closing chapter. They were the moment the frontier's simple doubles gave way to true repeating firepower, bridging the Old West and the modern battlefield in one unmistakable package. So there it is. The Winchester 1897, the shotgun that closed the frontier and opened the modern battlefield. If you want more untold gun stories, hit subscribe and check out our deep dive on the rarest Wild West revolvers. Until next time.